The rain on the metal roof was a sound Joel had stopped really hearing a long time ago. 4 years of graveyard shifts had trained his brain to treat it like background noise, like the hum of the drink cooler or the wheeze of the heater the manager had been promising to fix since October. He only noticed it when it stopped. That night, it didn't stop. It was 1:17 a.m. He knew without checking the clock. After enough time, a shift develops its own texture. And this was the texture of the dead hour, when the last service trucks had already passed, and the first ones of the early morning hadn't shown up yet. The I-80 outside was invisible through the glass. When a vehicle did go by, it showed up as a smear of yellow on the wet window, and was gone before you could count to one. Between one and the next, minutes of nothing. Joel was checking the cigarette inventory for the second time when he heard the door chime at 11:42 p.m. and the man walked in with wet hair asking for coffee and a paper map. Joel didn't have a map. The man settled for the coffee and went to sit at the corner table by the window. Joel waited for him to finish and leave. He didn't leave. He ordered a second coffee, sat with the empty cup in front of him for a while, staring out at the glass. Joel didn't ask anything. He'd learned early on that certain questions in the middle of the night at an empty highway stop don't lead anywhere good. The man wasn't drunk. He wasn't causing trouble. He was just there, with the quiet presence of someone who has no urgency to be anywhere else. Denny was the name. He'd given it when he ordered the first coffee, no last name. The way a trucker gives a name. Around 50, broad shoulders, hands that looked like they'd been used hard for a very long time. The kind of guy who waits without getting anxious. Joel recognized that type. He was pretty much that type himself. The night had been ordinary up to that point. 2 fill-ups between 11 and midnight. A woman buying bottled water and peppermint candy with the urgency of someone with a kid asleep in the car. And then silence. The rain had picked up around midnight and the I-80 had gone even quieter. Joel made the midnight coffee, drank half of it, let the rest go cold without noticing. At 12:30 he did his systems check. Cameras working, back door locked, side door to the stockroom bolted, backup generators showing green, everything in order. He ran through the routine mentally the way he did every night, finding nothing different. At 1:03 he walked over to the window to check the display on pump 3. There was a recurring glitch in the panel. It would go dark on its own for no reason, then come back on its own too. The manager knew about it and never sent anyone to look at it. Joel logged it in the incident notebook, and the manager never read the incident notebook. That was when he saw it. The rain warped everything in the glass. The light from the pole outside created reflections that sometimes looked like movement when it was nothing. And Joel knew how to tell a reflection from something real, because 4 years of staring at the same glass in the same conditions teaches you that. This wasn't a reflection. It was at the edge of the light's reach, past the pumps, where the lit asphalt ended and the darkness of the highway began. A shape, large, low to the ground, with a proportion Joel couldn't immediately fit into anything that had a reason to be out there. Not a dog, too wide, too tall at the shoulder. Not a deer, which sometimes showed up in that stretch. The posture was different, focused in a way a deer doesn't hold still. He stood there watching for about 3 seconds. The shape stayed still too. Joel tapped the glass with his finger. It wasn't a decision. It was reflex. The automatic gesture of someone who wants to test whether something is where it seems to be. The tap didn't change anything. The rain kept going. The reflection kept going. The shape kept going. Then a truck pulled off the highway exit with its high beams on, and the light swept across the station's asphalt for 1 full second. That flat white brightness that flattens everything and leaves no shadows. When the light passed, there was nothing there anymore. Joel stood there staring at the empty space for a while longer. The display on pump 3 was working normally. He went back to the counter. "Nasty rain," Denny said without turning to look at him. "Been like this since earlier. Saw a dead animal on the shoulder about 12 miles east. Big one, going too fast to make out what it was." Joel looked at the window again before answering. The asphalt outside was wet and empty, the streetlights reflecting in the puddle that had formed under pump 2. "Lot of things out here," he said. "Every now and then something shows up on the side of the road." Denny nodded once. It wasn't agreement. It was the nod of someone filing away information to use or discard later. He got up, walked to the coffee maker on the counter and helped himself without asking, with the ease of someone who had already decided how long he was going to stay. Joel didn't say anything about that. The rain kept going on the roof. He opened the incident notebook, wrote down the time and the status of Pump 3's display, and stared at the blank space below it without writing anything else. The ATM in the corner beeped with every transaction, and when there were no transactions, it beeped a smaller beep every 4 minutes that Joel had learned not to hear. He heard it when it stopped. It wasn't gradual. It was the kind of silence that shows up all at once when something that was on shuts off, a hole in the sound where there had been presence. Joel looked up from the counter. The ATM screen had gone black. Then the ceiling light flickered once, twice, and the station went dark for 2 seconds. Joel knew the generator. He knew how long it took to kick in, 3 seconds at most, sometimes less. He counted. On the second count, the power came back. The fluorescent overhead stabilized. The drink cooler picked up its hum again. The ATM rebooting with its orange loading screen. Denny had gotten up from the table. "Generator?" he asked. "Grid. Happens when it rains hard." Joel went to the monitoring panel behind the counter. Cameras, 4 of 5 operating, camera 2 with intermittent signal like always. Pumps, displays 1 and 2 active, display 3 dark again, display 4 blinking. Back door closed. Side door to the stockroom, open. He stared at the icon for a second. Green meant closed, red meant open. It was red. "Stockroom doors open," he said more to himself than to Denny. "Wind?" "Metal door with a double latch." Denny didn't answer that. Joel grabbed the flashlight from under the counter. Company policy, 1 flashlight per shift, charged and tested every week, one of the few policies he followed without question, and walked to the interior door that led to the stockroom. He stopped with his hand on the knob. From outside the wall, about 10 feet to his left, where the side of the stockroom faced the empty parking lot, something was breathing. It wasn't wind against metal. Wind against metal has a regular sound, a frequency. This had an organic rhythm, heavy, slow, with a pause between the exhale and the next inhale that wasn't a mechanical pause. Joel stood there with his hand on the knob long enough to hear 3 cycles. Then he opened the door. The stockroom was about 40 feet long and 20 wide. Metal shelves on both sides stocked with drinks, cleaning supplies, and automotive items, with a passage at the far end leading to the short hallway at the side door. The only lighting was an LED strip on the ceiling the manager had installed to avoid having to replace bulbs. Cold, even light, with no real shadows. Joel swept the space with the flashlight anyway, out of habit. Shelves undisturbed, clean concrete floor. No windows. The side door at the far end was in fact open. He could see the dark strip of the outside through the gap, rain hitting the concrete ledge out there. He walked toward it. The door hadn't been forced. The latch was locked in the open position, as if someone had opened it from the inside and left it that way. Joel hadn't opened that door since his 12:30 a.m. check, when it had been closed and latched. He checked the latch twice, then pushed the door open a little further and lit up the outside. The space behind the station was a narrow corridor between the wall and the chain-link fence that separated the property from the I-80. About 6 feet wide, concrete and gravel, no lighting of its own. The rain erased any detail beyond what the flashlight could reach. On the gravel floor, about 12 feet from the door, there was a mark. Joel had to look twice because the rain was wearing down the edges, but it was large enough to leave no doubt. A deep impression in the wet gravel, wide with a shape that wasn't a boot. There was another one behind it, and another, moving away toward the fence. Joel stood there looking at the marks longer than he should have. Then he closed the door, latched it, tested it twice, and walked back through the stockroom without running. Because running meant accepting something he hadn't decided to accept yet. Denny was at the counter when Joel came back, both hands flat on the Formica surface with the posture of someone waiting for an answer to a question they hadn't asked yet. "Was there something?" he asked. Joel set the flashlight under the counter, looked at the monitoring panel, side door now green, closed, then looked at the front window. Pump 2 was swaying. Not much. A small movement, that oscillation of a heavy hose when something passes close and displaces the air. But the rain was falling straight down by then. The wind had died, and the hose took about 4 seconds to stop moving. Yeah, Joel said. There was. Denny watched Pump 2 until it stopped swaying. Then he looked at Joel. Joel didn't elaborate. He'd said what he had to say, and saw no reason to add anything. There were marks in the gravel that the rain was washing away, a door that shouldn't have opened and had, and something breathing on the other side of a thin wall. It was what it was. What kind of thing? Denny said. It wasn't exactly a question. Didn't get a good look. But you saw something. I saw marks on the ground. Denny nodded slowly, with the movement of someone sorting through information. He went quiet for a moment, his eyes drifting back to the window. The rain had picked up again. Joel could hear it on the roof, heavier than before, the kind that sometimes comes before hail, but that night just seemed determined to keep going. How long you been working here? Denny asked. 4 years. And you've seen animals before? Dogs mostly, every now and then a coyote. Once a deer walked into the station, just stood under the pump canopy for about 10 minutes before it took off. But not like this. Joel didn't answer because there was no way to answer without saying something he was still trying not to say. He grabbed the leftover coffee, it was cold, drank it anyway. The cup made a small sound when it came back down on the counter. My truck's out there, Denny said. I know. Driver's side facing the station. In case I need to get out. Joel looked at the parking lot through the window. Denny's truck was in the spot closest to the entrance, a Kenworth with a high cab, amber marker lights still on. About 40 feet between the station door and the truck door. Joel measured it without meaning to. It was automatic. Don't go out right now, Joel said. Denny turned to look at him. Not with irritation, with the attention of someone who wants to understand the reason before agreeing or disagreeing. The hose didn't swing on its own, Joel said. That means there was something between Pump 2 and the stockroom wall when I came back inside. That space is between you and the truck. Denny processed that. How long ago? About 3 minutes. Could have moved on. Could have. Both men stared out at the parking lot. The station's light reached about 25 feet past the pumps. After that, it was wet darkness. The truck was in the lit zone, but the space around it, the side, the back, the strip between the vehicle and the fence, that was out of range. Joel couldn't see anything that confirmed or denied anything. The heater made a sound different from its usual one, a click in the duct that sometimes indicated a pressure change. Joel looked up by reflex. The ceiling was undisturbed. What do you think it is? Denny said. Don't know, but you've got a hunch. Joel did. He'd had one since the first moment in the stockroom, when the shape in the flashlight's reach didn't match up with anything he expected to find back there. The problem with a hunch was that naming something changes how much it weighs. While it's just a feeling, it fits inside reasonable doubt. Once it becomes a word, it doesn't fit anymore. Wouldn't do any good, Joel said. Denny accepted that without pushing. The rain didn't let up. If anything, it got more steady, that rhythm of water with no intention of stopping, that had found its pace and was going to hold it until some front decided to move. Joel went to the side window, the one facing the south side of the station, and looked out at the I-80 shoulder. Empty. No headlights in either direction. It was the kind of night that clears out a highway. He went back to the counter and checked the panel. Side door, closed. Cameras, 4 operating, camera 2 with weak signal. Pumps, displays 1 and 2 active, 3 dark, 4 steady. You got a weapon here, Denny said. Not exactly a question. No. Company won't allow it or you didn't want one. Both. Denny looked at his own right hand, opened and closed his fingers once. He had a big hand, with calluses at the base of his fingers that come from long, repetitive work with heavy gloves. I've got one in the cab. I know you do. Denny looked at him. Kind of thing you can tell, Joel said. Not saying it's a problem. The silence that settled after that was different from the ones before. More useful in a way. The two men had told each other something without having to spell it out, and the space between them had shifted in texture. It wasn't closeness. It was the practical recognition that they were in the same situation and that holding things back wasn't going to help either of them. "If I need to go get it," Denny said. "You don't need to yet. But if I do, then you tell me first," Joel answered. "And we think it through together." Denny nodded. He went back to the corner table, pulled out the chair and sat facing the window, his back to the wall. Joel noted the choice without commenting on it. It was the position anyone with some experience in a bad situation picks by instinct. Back covered, open space in view. Joel stayed behind the counter. The rain kept going. Sometime in the next few minutes, without anything visible happening, the station seemed to get a little smaller. It wasn't the walls. It was something else. The feeling that the space outside had arranged itself in a way that reduced the space they had in here. Joel couldn't explain it any better than that. He didn't try. At 1:52 a.m., Joel went to the stockroom to get the bottled water he needed to restock in the cooler. Not because it was urgent. The cooler still had 8 bottles in it. But standing behind the counter with nothing in his hands was starting to get to him. And moving gave him a reason to get up, cross the space, do something concrete with his body. Denny was still at the corner table. He hadn't slept. Joel checked every now and then, and the man's eyes were always open, fixed on the window. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say that wasn't about the thing outside. And talking about the thing outside without any more information than they had was just burning words for nothing. Joel opened the stockroom door and turned on the light. He stopped in the doorway. The smell had changed. Not rot, not blood, something raw. A layer of animal smell that hadn't been there before, damp and heavy. The kind that sticks in your nose and doesn't clear out fast. Joel knew what animals smelled like. He'd grown up with dogs and spent enough time in warehouses to know how a wet animal smells in a closed space. This was in the same family, but with a different intensity, as if the size of whatever was producing the smell was proportional to it. He stood in the doorway without going further. He swept the stockroom with his eyes. Shelves in place, stock organized just as he'd left it, concrete floor with nothing out of the ordinary. The side door was closed, latch in the correct position. No signs of forced entry, but the smell was there. He grabbed the bottles of water closest to the entrance without stepping all the way in, the ones on the first shelf to the left, and went back to the hallway. Closed the door behind him. Denny had gotten up from the table and was at the counter when Joel came back. "Something's been in the stockroom," Joel said. "Saw you stop in the doorway. It didn't go in, but it was in there." Denny was quiet for a moment. Side door was closed and latched. Then it got in before. Joel put the bottles in the cooler without counting them. Held the cooler door open for a second, the cold on his face, then closed it, or got out before. When I went to check, the door was open and the tracks led toward the fence. Could have gone out that way, left the smell, and the door stayed open because of that. You closed the door yourself. I did. So if it went out that way, it went out after you closed it. Joel hadn't thought through that sequence until Denny said it out loud. And when he did, he stood still for a few seconds in the same spot. It meant the animal had been in the stockroom at the same time he was in there. He had swept the space with the flashlight, walked all the way to the side door, stood there looking at the tracks in the ground for a while. And somewhere in all of that, there had been something large enough to produce that smell in a closed space. And he hadn't seen it. The shelves were 4 feet deep. At the back of each aisle there was enough shadow. Joel didn't say that. "It could have gone out the door before I got there," he said. The door was open. "Enough time." Denny didn't push back. Not because he agreed. Joel could tell when Denny agreed there was a specific kind of nod, a lightness in the silence. This was a different kind of silence, the kind from someone who decides not to argue something that isn't going to help. They both went to the front window without planning to. The parking lot was empty and wet. Denny's truck in the same spot, amber marker lights still on, cab dark. The pump canopy was dripping in 3 places where the gutters had clogged the previous winter and never been cleared. The I-80 outside hadn't shown a single headlight in the last 20 minutes. Joel looked at the right side of the station, the stockroom wall visible through the side window. No movement. He looked left at the south shoulder. The chain link fence and the thin strip of scrubby vegetation between the station and the highway. No movement. "It's circling," Denny said. Joel turned to him. "Came out of the stockroom, went around back, swung the hose when it came back around, and now it's on the other side." Denny spoke slowly, without urgency, like someone reading a map. "It didn't leave. It's making a loop around the perimeter." It was the same conclusion Joel was reaching, but hearing the other man say it out loud carried a different weight than thinking it alone. "You know how to read that. Worked at a meat processing plant in Kansas for 6 years. An animal that means to get in moves different from one that just wandered through." Joel looked at the station from the inside, as if he could see the floor plan from where he stood. He knew every point of entry. Front door, back door, stockroom side door, windows. 2 in front, 1 on the side, none in the back. The windows had single-pane glass, old aluminum frames. The back door was metal, but the frame was wood. The stockroom side door was the most solid, heavy-gauge steel with a double latch. The front door was glass. "How much does something like that weigh?" Joel said, not expecting Denny to know the answer. It was just a way of thinking out loud. Denny answered anyway. "Enough to go through what you're looking at." Joel turned his back to the window. The heater hissed in the duct. The rain hit harder for about 30 seconds, and then settled back to its previous rhythm. The ATM in the corner had fully rebooted and was blinking with its blue standby screen. "I need to try the phone," Joel said. The station's landline had its own dedicated line, separate from the electrical grid, and that was exactly why Joel went to it first. He picked up the receiver. Normal dial tone. He dialed the manager's number without looking it up. He'd memorized it in his first month on the job for practical reasons, not out of any fondness. It rang 6 times. Voicemail. He hung up, dialed again. Voicemail faster this time. The manager had rejected the call. It was almost 2 in the morning. Joel didn't get angry about that. It was the kind of thing he expected from his manager and from the world in general at that hour. He dialed 911. The call connected. A woman's voice asked him to describe the emergency, and Joel stood there with the receiver in his hand for a second, trying to put together a sentence that didn't sound crazy. He said there was a large animal circling the station, that he and another man were inside, that the animal had already gotten into the stockroom. The dispatcher asked what kind of animal. Joel said he couldn't identify it for certain. She asked if there were any injuries. There weren't. She said she'd logged the call and that the nearest unit was responding to an accident on the I-80 East, estimated 45 minutes to an hour depending on road conditions. She asked if they were in a safe location at the moment. Joel looked at the glass front door. He said yes. She asked him to call back if the situation changed and hung up with the efficiency of someone who has a call queue. Joel set the receiver back in the cradle. 45 minutes, Denny said. He hadn't asked. He'd heard. At least. Denny went to the side window, the one facing the stockroom wall. Stood there looking out with his hands in his pockets. "My cell doesn't get signal here. In this stretch of the I-80, the nearest tower is about 7 miles out. Sometimes it picks up, sometimes it doesn't." "Yours." Joel pulled his phone from his pocket. "No signal." "No." They had the landline and 45 minutes. Joel sorted through those 2 facts and didn't add anything. Sorting through what he had was more useful than thinking about what he didn't. Here was what was certain. 2 men, a corner station on the I-80 with no visible traffic in either direction, rain that wasn't stopping anytime soon, a creature that knew where they were and hadn't left. A glass door in front, a metal door with a rotting frame in the back, a side window with an old aluminum frame. Joel went to the stockroom hallway and came back with 2 rolls of industrial packing tape, the kind he used to seal stock boxes. It wasn't going to hold much, but crossing the tape over the side window frame was better than doing nothing, and having something to do with his hands helped him stop standing there listening to the rain. Denny held the tape while Joel applied it. They didn't comment on how useful the procedure actually was. They both knew what it was. Not a real barrier, but the difference between waiting with your hands busy and waiting with nothing. "You got family around here," Denny said. It wasn't small talk. It was the kind of question people ask when they're calibrating something. "No, my ex-wife is from Omaha. The kids are with her." "How many?" "2, 12 and 9. Denny nodded. "I've got a daughter in Cheyenne. Was on my way to see her." Joel finished crossing the tape over the window and tested the frame with both thumbs. It didn't give much. "When'd you leave?" "Yesterday morning. Denver." "Why'd you stop here?" Denny took a second before answering. "Tired. Was just going to get coffee and keep going. Then I stopped feeling like keeping going." Joel understood that without needing it spelled out. It was the kind of thing that happened on this road, at this hour, after a certain number of hours behind the wheel. The I-80 had that effect sometimes. It drained the urgency out of things, left everything with the same flat weight. They went to the counter. Joel checked the monitoring panel. Cameras working, back door closed, side door closed, nothing different. That was when the sound came back. Not from the stockroom this time. From the left side of the station, the side facing the south shoulder. A heavy, rhythmic breathing with that pause in the middle that Joel had heard before, closer than the first time. There was no stockroom wall between them now, just the exterior wall of the back restroom. Drywall and cheap paneling. Both men went still. The sound lasted about 20 seconds. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the sound had been. Joel found himself counting internally without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. Waiting for the sound to come back or for something to change. He got to 42 before he took a deep breath. "It's testing the walls," Denny said, voice low but not whispering. Whispering wasn't going to change anything. Joel didn't answer. He was staring at the restroom wall as if he could see through it, as if looking hard enough would reveal something useful. It didn't. He looked at the clock behind the counter. 2:09 a.m. 45 minutes had been an optimistic estimate for a wet road at night. Joel knew that kind of estimate from emergency dispatchers. It meant they could be looking at an hour, maybe more. They moved to the center of the station away from the walls and stood under the fluorescent light. The rain hit hard for a moment, then leveled out. Outside, nothing moved that they could see. Camera 2 came back online at 2:23 a.m. Joel noticed it on the panel. The icon that had been flickering with a weak signal stabilized, and the image that appeared on the small monitor behind the counter was grainy, but steady. Camera 2 covered the north side of the station, the strip between the stockroom wall and the fence that separated the property from the I-80. The narrow corridor where the tracks had been in the gravel. Joel stared at the monitor. For almost 2 minutes, just rain. The black and white image showed the wet concrete, the stockroom wall on the left, the fence on the right, the far end of the frame dissolving into dark. The camera had weak night vision, enough for about 25 feet. After that, too grainy to make out a shape. Then it appeared. It came in from the right edge of the frame, moving from the direction of the I-80, and Joel got the impression of mass before he got the impression of shape. That sense that the camera was showing something that took up more space than the frame could contain. Quadruped, low in its stance but tall at the shoulder, with a stride that covered ground with no wasted movement. Not the cautious gait of an animal unfamiliar with the terrain, the gait of something that had been here before. It crossed the corridor in 7 seconds and went out the left edge of the frame. Joel didn't say anything for a moment. Denny was next to him, had seen it too. Both of them stood there staring at the monitor as if the thing would come back while they were watching. It didn't come back. "Play it back," Denny said. "There's no recording. It's live feed. The recording system needs an external server the manager never set up." Denny let air out through his nose slowly. Joel understood the response. They stood in silence for a while, the monitor showing the empty corridor with the rain still falling, the stockroom wall wet and still. Joel tried to put what he'd seen into concrete measurements. He used the fence as reference. He knew the height of the fence, 4 feet of chain link, because he was the one who had measured it when a supplier asked once. The animal in the corridor came past the midpoint of the fence at the shoulder. That put the shoulder at around 30 inches off the ground, maybe more. The body was long, impossible to measure precisely from the camera angle, but when it was in the center of the frame, there was clearly space left over on both sides of the corridor. Not a dog. Not any kind of dog. Not a bear. Joel had seen bears, had worked 3 years before this at a grain cooperative in western Nebraska, where black bears showed up every now and then. And a bear has a different posture, a roll in the hips that wasn't there. This thing moved flat, efficient, with its weight distributed in a way that made each step soundless, even though Joel couldn't hear anything through the monitor. Werewolf, Denny said. The word hung in the air between them for a second. Joel didn't respond right away. Not because he disagreed. The word had been at the edge of his thinking since the stockroom, and hearing the other man say it out loud had the strange effect of being both absurd and the only word that fit with what they'd seen. The problem with the word wasn't what it named. It was the weight it carried with it. Everything the word dragged along about folklore, about things that don't exist, about an explanation that belonged to a different kind of conversation. But it belonged to this one too, to the monitor, to the empty corridor with the rain coming down. That's what it looks like, Joel said. Denny nodded once, flat. Not with resignation, with the pragmatism of someone who identifies the problem and moves to the next step. Then we need to think about what we're going to do when that unit doesn't show up in 45 minutes. Already thinking about it. And Joel went to the counter and started opening drawers. The first one had the incident notebook, pens, an old phone charger. The second had the ATM manual, spare keys for the pumps, a rubber band ball. The third had a box cutter, orange handle, 7-inch blade, the kind he used to open stock boxes. He set the box cutter on the counter. He looked around. There was a red fire extinguisher on the wall next to the back door. A shelf of automotive items with bottles of brake fluid, motor oil, cold start spray. In the restroom, which he wasn't going to now, there was a broom and a long-handled floor squeegee. Behind the counter there was the metal bracket that held the paper roll for the register printer. A steel tube about 28 inches long. It wasn't much, but it was what the station had at 2:28 a.m. On the I-80 in the rain with no cell signal, and Joel ran through the same logic he applied to low inventory and generator problems, and a manager who didn't answer his phone. You work with what you've got, not with what you should have. He pulled the tube off the bracket. It sat well in his hand. Denny looked at the tube, looked at Joel, then looked at the front door. My gun's still in the truck, he said. I know. If I can make it out there. Camera 2 showed it going through the north corridor. If it's still out there, it's between you and the truck. Denny turned to the front window. The Kenworth was the same 40 feet away as before, the amber marker lights reflecting in the wet asphalt. 40 feet in a straight line. Joel ran the calculation he knew Denny was also running. Not the distance, but the time. How long it takes to cover 40 feet at a run and open a truck door with a hand that shakes. Not yet, Joel said. Denny didn't answer, but he stayed where he was. The camera 2 monitor showed the empty corridor. The rain hit the roof hard for a moment, one of those gusts that comes from nowhere and passes. And during it, Joel wouldn't have heard anything even if there had been something to hear. When the gust passed, the station settled back into its usual silence. The hum of the cooler, the hiss of the heater, the steady rain on the metal. Joel looked at the clock. 2:31 a.m. The rain eased at 2:44 a.m., and it was that easing that made it possible to hear. It wasn't the breathing sound Joel had heard before. This was something else. A rhythmic pressure against the back wall, low, steady, as if something large was leaning against it and shifting slightly against the surface. Not a knock, not a scratch. Contact. The kind of sound a thing makes when it's still, but not completely still. Joel and Denny looked at the back wall at the same time. The sound lasted about 40 seconds. Then it stopped. Then pump 1 went dark. Not the display. The light itself on the canopy over pump 1 on the left side of the fuel island. A bulb Joel had replaced 3 weeks ago. It went out with a soft pop and stayed out, and the difference in the parking lot lighting was immediate. The left strip of asphalt in front of the station disappeared into darkness, and what was there now was just the weak reflection of the other lights coming in from a bad angle. Joel went to the panel without hurrying. The breaker for pump 1 had tripped. He looked at the icon, looked at camera 2 on the monitor, north corridor empty, then looked at camera 1, which covered the front of the station. The pump canopy appeared at an angle in the upper left corner of the image, grainy as always, and in the now dark strip to the left there was a shape. still, facing the glass. Joel stared at it for a second before calling Denny over with a nod. Denny came, looked at the monitor, and the two of them stood there with the cooler humming in the background, and the image frozen on the screen as if the thing knew it was being watched and didn't care. It was large. That was the first thing the monitor confirmed without any possibility of perspective error. Pump 2 was in the background as a reference point, and Joel knew it stood about 5.5 feet to the top nozzle, and the animal in front of it was taller than that at the shoulder. The body was long, the head wide and low. The front legs spread with the weight shifted slightly forward. It stayed still long enough for Joel to record every detail the resolution allowed. It wasn't looking at the cameras. It was looking at the front glass. Joel felt that differently than he'd felt the sound, differently than he'd felt the smell in the stockroom. This was something else. The awareness that what was outside knew exactly where they were and was looking straight at them through the glass, and that the glass was the only thing between the two sides, and that the glass was the weakest part of the entire station structure. "It sees us," Denny said. "Yeah. The light went out because it touched the external breaker." Joel hadn't thought of that, but it made sense. The external breaker panel was in a metal box on the north side of the station, accessible from outside. He accessed it himself when he needed to. The box sat about 5 feet off the ground. Yeah, that's not an animal that wandered through by accident. No. Denny watched the monitor for another second. Then he turned to Joel with that expression Joel had started to recognize. Not panic, not anger, but a determination that was getting harder to hold inside of waiting. "I need the gun," he said. "Denny, it's out front right now. The north corridor is clear. I go out the back door, come around the south side, reach the truck from the passenger side where it isn't." Joel looked at the monitor. The animal was still in the dark strip, facing the glass. "You don't know where it'll be 30 seconds from now. I know where it is right now. And if it hears the back door open..." Denny didn't answer right away. Joel watched the calculation happening. Not the calculation of someone who's scared, but the calculation of someone with enough experience in bad situations to know that waiting isn't always the safer option. "How long do you think the glass holds?" Denny said. Joel looked at the front door. 6mm tempered glass, aluminum frame. The same door since the station had been built, before Joel started working there. There was a crack in the lower right corner that the manager knew about and had never sent anyone to replace. "Not long," he said. "Then the question isn't whether I go. The question is when." Joel knew Denny was right. Not about the route. The south side route was a problem Denny was underestimating because he didn't know the terrain the way Joel did, but about the principle. Waiting on the unit meant waiting inside a time frame the glass might not respect. "There's something you don't know," Joel said. "The south side of the station has a drainage ditch between the wall and the shoulder, about 20 inches deep. At night in the rain, you don't see it before you're in it." Denny went quiet. "If you go down in that ditch in the dark, you stop running long enough." Silence. "I know this ground," Joel said. "You don't." The animal on the monitor moved. Not fast. It was a shift in position, the kind of movement an animal makes when it transfers weight from one support to another. The head dropped slightly. The body compressed a little, like something working out a calculation. Then it went still again. Joel looked at the clock. 2:53 a.m. He'd called 911 at 2:09. 44 minutes. If the estimate was 45 minutes to an hour, and if it was an honest estimate for a wet road at night, there was a chance they'd be here soon. There was also a chance they wouldn't. "If I go out the front," Denny said. "It's out front. I know where it is. You'd open the door fast enough to let me back in if I needed." Joel looked at him. "That's not a plan. It's the plan I've got." "Denny." The man looked at Joel with the expression of someone who's already decided and is giving him one last chance to talk him out of it. Joel knew that expression. He'd seen it in the mirror during the 3 months before the hardware store closed, when he kept opening every morning knowing it was just a matter of time. The expression of someone about to do a bad thing because stopping feels worse than going through with it. "Let me think," Joel said. 5 minutes. Denny looked at the monitor. The animal was still in the dark strip, facing the front glass, not moving. The 5 minutes didn't happen. Joel was still thinking when Denny went to the back door. He didn't rush, didn't make noise. He simply rose from where he was standing and walked with the quiet determination of a man who has made a decision and doesn't need to announce it. Joel caught it in his peripheral vision and turned in time to see Denny's hand on the door bar. "Wait," Joel said. Denny stopped, looked at Joel over his shoulder. "The monitor," Joel said. They both went to the panel. Camera 1 still showed the animal standing in the dark strip in front of the glass. Camera 2 showed the north corridor empty. There was no camera covering the south side. "South looks clear from what I can tell," Joel said. "But I don't have a camera there." "I know. The ditch is about 12 feet from the wall, runs parallel to the shoulder. You clear it, you get to the corner of the parking lot, and the truck is about 25 feet from there." Denny turned to him with an expression different from the ones before. "You're coming with me. Someone needs to stay on the monitor. If it moves away from the front, I'll call you." "How?" Joel went to the counter and grabbed 2 walkie-talkies off the hook under the cigarette shelf. Battery checked every week along with the flashlight. He handed one to Denny. "Channel 3. Denny looked at the radio for a second, then put it in his jacket pocket. He went back to the back door with Joel behind him. Joel put his hand on Denny's shoulder before he opened it. "Slow on the way out. Don't run until you're well clear of the door. Running makes noise." Denny nodded. "Ditch at 12 feet, then 25 feet to the truck. Passenger side." "Got it. If it moves, I'll call on the radio." Denny opened the door. The rain came in with the cold, that Nebraska cold that has physical weight, and the sound of the wet I-80 was suddenly much more present. Joel stood in the doorway with the radio in his hand and watched Denny go out, slowly, like he'd asked, pressed against the wall, turning south without looking back. He closed the door without locking it, ran back to the monitor. The animal hadn't moved. Joel kept his eyes moving between the monitor and the clock. 30 seconds for Denny to reach the ditch. 20 more to cross the parking lot to the truck. 50 seconds total if everything went clean. He counted. 20 seconds. The animal on the monitor still hadn't moved. 30. Still. 40. The head moved. Not fast. That same slow adjustment again. The kind of movement Joel had seen before on the monitor. But this time the head didn't come back to its previous position. It stayed turned slightly to the left toward the south, as if it had heard something the monitor couldn't pick up. Joel pressed the radio. "It heard something. Where are you?" Static. Then Denny's voice low. "Crossing the parking lot. Truck's about 15 feet. Stop. Silence. Stay right where you are." On the monitor, the animal moved away from its position in front of the glass. It didn't go south right away. It took a sideways step, then another, like something reorienting itself. The head stayed turned to the left. "Joel." Denny's voice on the radio was different, even lower, almost no voice at all. "It's looking at me." Joel looked at the monitor. The animal had moved out of camera 1's frame. Camera 2 still showed the north corridor empty. No image of the south side. "Stay still," Joel said into the radio. "Don't run." Silence. "Denny." Static. Then the sound of fast footsteps on wet asphalt picked up by the open mic on the radio, and Joel recognized the sound before he could process what it meant. They were running steps, heavy, spread out, the kind a person makes when they're scared enough to forget what they were told to do. Then a different sound. Louder, shorter, without any rhythm. Then nothing. Joel stood there with the radio in his hand for 2 seconds. Then he went to the back door. He opened it. The south parking lot was empty and wet, the Kenworth's amber marker lights still on to the north. The rain hitting the asphalt with that flat, even sound that makes no distinction about what it covers. There was no one between the door and the truck. Joel stood in the doorway long enough for the rain to soak his right shoulder. He called Denny's name once, low. No answer. He closed the door, locked it. He went to the panel. Camera 2 still showed the north corridor empty. Camera 1 showed the front parking lot with no animal in front of the glass. Back door closed, side door closed. He looked at the clock. 3:04 a.m. He picked up the steel tube from the counter, stood in the center of the station under the fluorescent light, away from the walls, with the radio in one hand. and the tube in the other. The rain kept going. The front glass gave at 3:17 a.m. Not all at once, it was a process. First, a low sound of pressure, the kind glass makes when something is pushing without quite breaking through yet, and Joel stood in the center of the station listening to that for about 3 seconds before the aluminum frame buckled in the lower left corner with a metallic snap. Then the glass cracked from the old fracture in the right corner, the one the manager knew about and had never sent anyone to replace. And the crack ran across the entire panel in under a second, and the glass came down. Joel had moved before the glass fell. Not toward the door, toward the stockroom hallway, because it was the only part of the station with concrete walls on all sides and a metal door between him and the open space. He went in, pulled the door shut behind him, pressed the weight of his body against it. He heard the glass finish falling on the other side. Then silence. Then the rain coming through the gap where the front door had been. That different sound of rain inside an enclosed space closer, without the filter of the roof. Joel stood with his back against the metal door and the steel tube in his right hand and the box cutter open in his left. He took one deep breath, then stopped taking deep breaths because the sound of his breathing covered the sounds from outside. For almost a minute, nothing. Then footsteps. They weren't like dog footsteps on hard flooring. They had a different weight, a pressure he felt more than heard. The kind of vibration that comes through the concrete before it comes through the air. Slow, methodical. The animal was sweeping through the store space with that same logic Joel had watched on the monitor. Not attacking, circling first, learning the new environment before committing to a direction. Joel looked at the stockroom behind him. The LED strip on the ceiling was on. Shelves on both sides, the center aisle about 6 feet wide, the side door at the far end. He had latched that door earlier. He knew he had latched it. He stood there listening to the footsteps on the other side of the metal door. They were getting closer. There was a distance between recognizing that something is going to happen and feeling it happen. And Joel crossed that distance in the seconds that followed in a way that wasn't panic. It was more like a cold clarity, the kind that shows up when there are no more decisions to make, and all that's left is what you do with your body. He had the tube. He had the box cutter. He had a 6-foot wide, 40-foot long space with metal shelving on both sides. The door took 2 impacts to give. The first bent the bottom of the frame. Joel held, but the metal gave under his feet, and he stepped back twice. The second tore the door away from the upper frame, and it came in crooked, throwing Joel sideways, and he hit the right shelf with his shoulder and heard the motor oil cans hit the concrete. The animal came in. There was no grainy camera between him and the actual size of the thing now. There was 6 feet of concrete aisle and cold, shadowless LED light. And what Joel saw in that light was a body that filled the aisle shoulder to shoulder. A wide head with flat ears brushing the shelves on both sides. 4 points of contact on the concrete with that forward-weighted posture he'd seen on the monitor, but which in person had a different quality. The quality of something that doesn't need to. Rush because it knows the space is already its. Joel got to his feet fast, faster than he expected to manage, and stood facing it in the aisle. It was larger than the monitor had suggested. They stayed like that for a second that had a strange duration. The animal lowered its head. Joel threw the oil can he'd picked up off the floor without thinking. It caught it on the snout, and the sound the animal made wasn't a growl. It was something more guttural, shorter. A vocalization of pain and irritation that Joel felt in his chest from the volume. The head swung to the side and the front legs hit the concrete twice, and it pulled back half a step. Joel went left without stopping. There was no room to get past the animal on the side. It filled the aisle. But there was a gap of about a foot between the end of the left shelf and the back wall. And Joel had placed that shelf there himself 2 years ago when the manager asked him to reorganize the stockroom. And he knew the gap existed because he'd never been able to push the shelf all the way against the wall on account of a plumbing pipe. He reached the gap before the animal had fully reoriented. He squeezed his body through. The plumbing pipe caught his right ribs with a pain he registered and ignored. He came out the other side, between the last shelf and the back wall, about 10 feet from the side door. The animal had turned in the aisle. Not fast. The space was too tight for its size, the shelves blocking its movement. and Joel heard metal bending as it repositioned. He reached the side door. The latch was locked. He opened it, pushed through. The rain and Nebraska cold hit him all at once. He stepped out into the north corridor. He ran. The ditch on the south side was Denny's problem, and it had been a problem that cost dearly. But the north corridor was flat concrete all the way to the chain-link fence, and Joel knew every foot of it. He reached the fence, put his foot on the wire, swung over with the tube still in his hand, because he hadn't thought to drop it, and came down on the I-80 shoulder on the other side. He got to his feet. The highway was empty in both directions. The rain hit the asphalt with the sound he'd been hearing through the roof all night, and that sounded completely different from out here. Behind him, through the north corridor, he could hear the stockroom shelves giving way in a sound of collapsing metal, one after another, sequential like heavy dominoes. Then it stopped. Joel stood on the shoulder with the rain soaking through his shirt. He looked both ways on the I-80. Empty. No headlights. He looked at the station. The sign still lit. The fluorescent light still visible through the gap where the front glass had been. The pump canopy dripping in the 3 spots where the gutters had clogged. He looked at Denny's Kenworth with the amber marker light still on. He stayed where he was. The cold came in slowly. It wasn't immediate. His body still carried the heat from the effort. And for about 2 minutes, Joel stood on the shoulder with his soaked shirt without feeling how cold it really was. Then the heat left, and the Nebraska cold at 3 in the morning in the rain came in for real. The kind that doesn't warn you. That's already there by the time you notice it. He didn't move. He stood looking at the station on the other side of the fence. The sign lit up. The pumps. The canopy dripping. The dark gap where the front glass had been. No visible movement inside. No sound beyond the rain and the distant hum the I-80 always had even when it was empty. That background road noise that's neither wind nor water, but something between the two. The Kenworth's marker lights were still on. Joel stood looking at the truck for a while and couldn't stop looking. There was a quality to the vehicle sitting there with its lights still on that he didn't know how to name. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't guilt. It was something simpler and heavier. The kind of feeling that doesn't have an easy word, and that Joel didn't try to find. He took the radio out of his pocket, still working, the green light blinking. He held it in his hand without pressing the button for a while, then put it back in his pocket. The rain eased a little around 3:30, that temporary reprieve the night sometimes gives before coming back. In the break, Joel heard the I-80 more clearly. Empty in both directions, no headlights on the horizon to the east or west. There was a line of signal poles he could see for about a quarter mile before the curve, and not one of them was lighting up anything but wet asphalt. He listened. The station was quiet. Then the chain-link fence in the north corridor moved. Not much. A sway, the kind wind makes in tensioned wire. But the wind had died, and Joel knew the sound of wind in a fence because he'd worked there 4 years and heard it every night. He stood on the shoulder with his eyes on the fence and the tube in his hand that he had forgotten to drop a second time. The sway stopped. Then it came back. Longer this time, lower on the fence, like pressure being applied to the bottom of the wire. Joel measured the distance, about 50 feet between where he was standing and the point on the fence that was moving. 50 feet of open I-80 asphalt, no cover, no side route that led anywhere before the distance got closed. He didn't run. He had learned that from Denny in a way he hadn't wanted to learn it. Running makes noise. Noise gives orientation. Orientation closes distance faster than tired legs in the rain. He stood still, slowed his breathing, stared at the fence without blinking until his eyes started to burn. The pressure on the fence increased for a second. Joel could see the wire giving slightly, the structure leaning a few inches toward the highway. And then it stopped. Silence. Joel counted to 20 without moving anything but his eyes. The fence was still. Then the headlight appeared around the curve to the west. Not a car. A truck, you could tell by the height of the headlights and the engine sound that arrived with the light. That diesel rumble the I-80 sometimes sent back before the vehicle came into view. Joel stepped off the shoulder and into the middle of the right lane without thinking too hard about it, with the tube raised high, and stood there in front of the headlights as they grew. The truck slowed. It stopped about 60 feet before reaching him. engine running and high beams on, and the driver's door opened and a man climbed down with his hand shielding his eyes against his own lights. What happened out here? Joel looked at the man, looked at the station on the other side of the fence. The sign lit up, the pumps, the dark gap of the entrance, the chain-link fence in the north corridor still and quiet. Nothing visible. "My station," Joel said. His voice came out different than he expected. Not shaky, just flat, like his throat had forgotten its normal volume. "Had a problem. I need a ride to the next phone." The man stood looking at Joel for a second. The soaked shirt, the tube in his hand, the station fence across the highway, with the expression of someone running a quick calculation about the kind of problem he was looking at. "You can leave the pipe there," the man said, with the careful but not unfriendly voice of someone trying to help but wanting to understand what he's helping with. Joel looked at the tube, lowered it slowly, set it down on the shoulder. He got in the truck. The man walked around, climbed in on the driver's side, and the Peterbilt started moving again with that slow roll of a heavy vehicle picking up speed. The cab heater was running high, and the warmth moved through Joel's wet clothes in a way that made him close his eyes for a second. When he opened them, the station was already behind him. He didn't look in the mirror. The I-80 opened up ahead with the headlights cutting through the light rain still falling, and the driver didn't say anything else for a while. The silence of a man who can tell when someone isn't ready to talk. Joel kept his eyes on the highway. There was a different color on the eastern horizon. Not light yet, just the absence of the deepest dark. That transition that happens before actual dawn, when the night starts losing its conviction. Joel looked at that. The rain hit the windshield with that steady sound the wiper cut through in a constant rhythm. And somewhere between the station fence and the next toll plaza, the cold finally went away for good.